War Room, Gwinnett County, the people's voice, keeping you informed. War Room, Gwinnett County, the people's voice. Thank you for tuning in to War Room, Gwinnett County. I'm your host, Antonio Jones. In today's segment, in Across County Lines, we have a special guest and lawyer, Jared Craig. So Jared, yeah, man, glad to have you back. I know we interviewed you when you were running for, was it U.S. Congress?
Yes, U.S. House District 3 in Georgia.
Yeah, so we interviewed Jared some time ago. But I wanted to bring him back because he's a lawyer, has a great legal background, just overall a great guy. And there's been a lot of violence that's been breaking out across the country, and specifically in the school system. And I believe that Jared has dealt with a few different cases that involve school violence and was able to get a few things done and move the ball, because this particular thing can be kind of a little hairy because we're dealing with elected positions. And a lot of times people feel like their hands are tied because everybody's saying, well, in order to get this person out or get some kind of remedy, you just have to wait until another election comes around and vote the person out. Well, there's a lot of injury that's occurring during that time process, and this may not be a best benefit to the parents or the teachers, and quite frankly, the school system. So, Jared, just give us a little bit of your background in law and bring the people up to speed to what is it exactly that you do.
Okay. Well, I started practicing law in 2009, and I decided what type of law I was going to practice is I wanted to represent and advocate individuals. So what work I did meant something to someone. And at that time, I know it sounds kind of bumper stickerish, or sloganish, but I wanted to support those that were being underserved or those that couldn't defend themselves. And so I found myself doing a lot of work in family law, a lot of work in juvenile court. And as a general practitioner, I kind of have a broad stroke of things that I do. But I found that there was a theme going that I was representing the interests of the elderly and children. And in doing so, those are the two groups of people that really rely on advocates, aside of the veterans and other adults that might need advocates also. That's where I started off my law practice. And I've matriculated into politics to advocate for more people, for bigger national purposes. And I'm now part of the Veterans for Trump group. I'm a member of Veterans for America First. I'm a founding member of Legacy PAC. And I keep the Vet Voice podcast going on a regular basis. Now, my background in litigation, I always like to remind people in shows, conversation, or social media that you hit the nail on the head, that during the time between elections, a lot of bad things can happen. And we don't have to wait on election season to use the judicial system, the court system, and filing certain actions that can resolve or remedy some of the wrongs that are done while we're waiting to replace someone, or we're waiting to find someone else to step into that role. And specifically about schools, they're trying their best to keep parents, adults, unless you work for the school, they don't want you in the school for any reason whatsoever. And they're trying to restrict school board meetings to only those with guardianship or custodial rights of the children who attend those schools. And the problem that we're having is that the schools are changing the tone of our communities. Our communities are a direct reflection of what comes out of the school. Our future leaders come out of the school. Our future business leaders, our future employees as business owners come out of these schools. We're being disenfranchised by our own public school system while we're sitting here and paying taxes that fund them.
Right.
And
so speaking
taxation without representation issue.
Yeah. So speaking of which, I'm a taxpayer. My kids are homeschooled, and I decided to get involved in the fight. There are a lot of great parents out there going to school board meetings, letting their voices be heard. But so you're saying as a taxpayer, just say for instance, I signed up to go to a school board meeting in my county. Right now, by law, what you're saying is they don't have to let me publicly speak, even though I'm paying taxes.
That's actually correct. The school boards, the superintendents, they are interpreting Georgia law to empower them to determine who can and who cannot attend school board meetings as a direct reflection of being criticized at these school board meetings by parents. I believe Joe Biden even referred to them as domestic terrorists. And Kamala Harris has been vocal about um, bad mouthing parents over the ability to ask questions at these school board meetings as to why things are going on. Now, with my boots on the ground, my feet in the swamp, however you want to look at that, I see that there are some policies out there in the schools that are flawed on their face completely, from the federal government funding all the way down to the local protocols. And part of that is the Title I conditional funding. And you and I spoke before this, and we kind of speak commonly,
Hmm.
I wouldn't say daily, but at
So
least once a
so hold
week we
on.
interact.
One point before you get to the Title One section.
Okay.
Some one of the problems that the teachers are having specifically in Gwinnett County is, let's say for instance, they get a student in that's been got into a fight, or maybe they're using foul language in the classroom, and they write a referral. So what we've been told as far as on the show is they send a referral in, and it doesn't get processed. And then when they run up the chain, I guess as far as they can go, as far as in their school, they're being told that we 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 don't want to process this student, and they're not really given a valid reason why. On the surface, what I'm seeing is when this data comes out, it's making the schools look bad, and it's creating a overall issue. And plus, it goes against the narrative depending on what race that student is. So what do you think that the teachers can do? Because quite frankly, a lot of them are afraid to lose their job. So if they are caught going to a meeting or something like that where teachers are gathering outside of school trying to come up with solutions and remedy, they feel like they will be you know possibly even fired, or up under the magnifying glass for doing that. So do you have any input on that, or what teachers may consider doing or be able to do?
Yeah, I think that you're right to say the teachers have their hands tied. And it's gotten into, I think, a coping method of keep your head down and keep quiet, which I don't think garners a lot of respect from the students, which then perpetuates the problem. And you talking about kids acting out, cussing in the classroom, or fighting, or stealing something. That is a conflict specifically in the teacher's control and command. And they're not allowed to command their classroom. A lot of times, that same student who actually harms the teacher themselves is forced right back into the classroom with that teacher who has been physically harmed or threatened. And the policies are toothless. And if
Yeah.
we're going to teach our kids something, it shouldn't be that the children run the classroom. We should empower the teachers. Now, the other
Uh,
side of that is that the quality teachers that we have started to hire, because of lots of policies, principles, and who's coming out of college to teach school,
hmm
and with the wages as what they are, we're not getting cream of the crop people that are wanting to be teachers anymore.
Yeah.
We're
And
getting
wait, and
people.
on top of that, teachers in the system are not safe, so they're looking to get out as quick as they can. And we're losing a lot of good teachers and also principals. People are trying to retire early and abandoning ship. And to go back to your point about the kids knowing that they're not having any real consequences, just say, like you were saying, maybe they assault a teacher. They're thrown right back into the classroom, and these same kids ended up assaulting a child. This is kind of what happened And one of the parents had called it, inboxed the show and said, "Hey, my child had warned the teachers and the administration in the school as far as this, she was receiving threats." And the very next day, she was attacked. So like you're saying, these kids know that the consequence, they pay attention to what's going on. They watch the news, they know what the narrative is, they know what kind of power their teachers have and what they don't have, and they're responding to it accordingly. And they not taking their teachers serious. And there is a lot of flight or teachers leaving this county specifically here in Gwinnett and going to other counties. We're losing a lot of good teachers because of this.
I agree with you. Think about being able or putting yourself in a position of wanting to be a teacher, wanting to do a noble job, and then getting to a position in a school and your hands are tied to where you can't even focus on curriculum. You're focusing on your own personal safety, and it's not the goal is not to educate children any longer. It's to, I guess, indoctrinate kids and to allow them to rule the room. Um, I feel bad for the teachers. I have teachers in my family. I was in school until I was almost 30, so I respect teachers and the job that they perform.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of teachers who are learning to just skate by and to like keep their head down and keep quiet. And they're also doing a disservice to the students because
Yeah.
those students are not learning the lessons that are intended to be learned. They learn coping methods for social violations. I have juvenile cases, and one comes to mind. I can't mention names because they're juveniles, but there was a fight that broke out between two children, approximately 12 and 13 years old. And the fight was over politics. One child was wearing an American flag shirt, nothing other than an American flag. The other child was wearing a BLM shirt. The child with the BLM shirt approached the child with the American flag shirt and attacked him in the hallway. The child with the American flag shirt had no idea why he was being attacked, looked around for teachers to assist. No teacher stepped in and broke up that fight until this boy's nose was broken, his ocular socket was actually out of place, and this
Wow.
child that got beaten up was a trained MMA martial artist. When we got to the juvenile court, the school failed to inform the court of to the extent of the child's injuries. I was the one who came in and informed the judge, who had no idea the extent of the child's injuries, and they were undercharging it as an affray, which is basically just being too loud in public. It's the lowest rung of the charges when it should have been aggravated battery because of the nature of the injuries. So you have the schools coddling down well, not coddling down, but restricting the access for the teachers to enforce rules.
Hmm.
Then when things happen, the teachers don't feel empowered to break up those fights. And then when those fights get to the judicial system, the juvenile court, you have it dumbed down by the administration to save face for who? And I think that brings us back to the Title I discussion.
Right.
Um, and that being the condition for funding, they're hiding all of these incidences. And look what's happening. Kids are being injured. I'm talking about Coweta County, but this is happening in a lot of other counties.
It
Gwinnett
is.
County.
Yes.
I'm hearing some horrendous stories about violence between the students. And I'm wondering what's going to the courts, if anything.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people feel like their hands are tied um, with this, and if it was my child, I know I'd be trying to bring some type of a civil action if I could. So maybe you can speak to, and again, we want to make sure we have a disclaimer that we're not giving out medical advice here on the show, but we're just, letting people know what their potential options may be and what they may consider doing. So what are some of the solutions that you may say for these parents who may be concerned, and teachers as well, and that might feel like they don't have anywhere to go and they don't know what to do if they're in a situation where violence has been committed against them on the school grounds?
Well, this gets a little hairy because each one of the segments of the population that you just referenced has a different mode of relief. First of all, I want to say it's very, very difficult to sue a county school or a city school. They make it very difficult for you to sue. You almost have to ask their permission, and they have restricted timelines, and then the access to the evidence is a little bit less than efficient. But let's say that you have a student and your student is injured at school by another student. A lot of people don't realize that you can sue that the offending child's parents under their homeowner's insurance policy if in fact they are homeowners. And you can seek relief up to whatever that policy allows, based upon the injuries to your child. As a teacher, you have a contractual relationship with the school board and with the school in which you operate or you teach. So you have a breach of contract, you have a breach of duty, you have a different angle and a different set of consequences if you file suit. You might lose your job, but win the case. So you have that kind of tension there. Um, but I think that what we might need to do is reevaluate the protections that we've given schools as very difficult to file suit and limited timelines to gather evidence and to send certain notices. So the solution, I believe, is to rely on the courts more, to give the judges more discretion, and to not tie the hands of the judicial department by giving them bad evidence. I mean, a lot of times you look at what people in our society take oaths, and they're normally public servants.
Yeah.
For the purpose of this discussion, I'll just hit on public servants and holding them accountable to those oaths. Right now, there is a case on its way up to the Supreme Court, and it's the Brunson action. And it specifically speaks to oath takers and holding people accountable to the oaths of office. In many states, the breach of the oath is a crime. I don't know about the having teachers take oaths, but I think it might be a good idea because or administrators take oaths, but the
Right.
school board definitely takes oaths.
Yeah.
I know that for a fact.
So that's
And then you
counties,
can file a writ of
county school.
mandamus.
So the
I'm
county
sorry.
school boards and all of that, that they you're saying that, well, we know that they take an oath. So what you're saying is at the moment that that oath is violated, that's basically like a breach of contract, a breach of commitment, right? So
That
that's
is
got to
correct.
mean something. So there should be maybe some sets of auto actions. We don't know. So what would you say? And should the
Well,
legislature consider passing law based on something hereafter if you breach a contract? Because like you said, it gets really hairy for the citizens. If somebody breaches the contract, we kind of like sitting back waiting on somebody to throw themselves up under the bus, with revealing a certain amount of information. Maybe something like, hey, if you breach a contract, then certain amount of information should be automatic. I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing out some ideas. I mean, you're the lawyer in this, so
well, I look at it more as a breach of a duty of loyalty. So the
okay,
breach of duty of loyalty, it's akin to a fiduciary. If you invest money with somebody, that they have a duty to maximize your investment through their
right,
decision making. But as a comparative, a breach of a duty of loyalty attaches in many corporate settings. So you can say if someone acts against the corporation, the employee, or corporation versus the employee, you can bring that up. But the fact that we're dealing with government schools and municipalities and county organizations, or county commissions and county school boards, the problem is that governments can generally do things that other people cannot do. That's kind of the definition of a government, is that they can control with their sovereignty and do things that an individual would be held accountable for. And I won't go into the full extent of that, but it gives them some freedoms and immunities that are not appreciated or not allowed in corporate America. So under that, with the oath and the breach of duty, there's a action called a writ of mandamus. where you're holding someone accountable for not doing their job. And it's specifically cut out for government workers. Now, a lot of attorneys kind of scoff at it as kind of an archaic means of calling out someone, and they're used for political purposes to point down your opponent in an election year or something. And they're normally taken as an academic discussion more so than an actual filing. But holding people accountable to their duty that's directly related to their job, I think the teachers may have that right. Well, I know they have the right to file, but without the consequences, and add some whistleblower protections. If you
Yeah.
have a teacher who knows something's going on, let's say not the teacher that's getting beaten up, but the teacher next door who knows all about what's going on, or the coach or whomever else, give some whistleblower protections.
Yeah.
That's kind of a very difficult thing as the laws currently are. So the Georgia General Assembly would be the ones, or would be the entity to take on the laws and procedures at the state level.
Right. We got it. So we definitely need to make sure we have fortified whistleblower protection because a lot of people are afraid to come forward. Then you ask the question, we know that the teachers have a duty to the school system, but what is the duty to the kids? You know what I mean? So it's like they're in like you said, they're in a weird position because they're making a decision sometimes with, hey, am I going to lose my job in the back of their head? But at the same time, you have a child, which I think that should be priority. The safety of the children should always be priority, and the quality of their education should always supersede this a decision about, hey, am I going to be sanctioned by my boss or by somebody from the superintendent's administration for calling this out, saying, hey, I hear things going on next door, or there are things going on in my school, and I'm turning in this paperwork. The students are not being processed. They're being sent right back to class, and they're committing more actions on people. And this thing is just continuing to fester. So, you know,
Right.
there's gotta, I feel like the children are not being put first. And I'm not saying that the teachers, we have great teachers in Gwinnett County school system, outstanding, but they're in a position to where they feel like they can't call out what's going on, which would be putting the child first, making sure they're safe and these children have a good education.
Well, one thing I just thought about is I worked overseas for a foreign government for a short period of time, and we had an issue of corruption, and the corruption was in the middle management. Right, we were trying to figure out who was the wrongdoer, and the way that we solved it, or we attempted to solve it, because I'm not there any longer, and I think anyway. Long story short, is we made a direct complaint from the instance where and for the example of the school, the teacher's classroom where the event occurred, that teacher, we could say, could make a complaint or a referral directly to the state superintendent and not go through their chain of command, because we've incentivized the chain of command to withhold those referrals, to withhold those uh, incident reports.
Yeah, because
And
it's two things going on. You got the schools that don't want to have all these potentially, and I'm not saying that all the principals and things like that, but there's an incentive, like you say, for the school to not have as much incident reports going on. And also, the teacher doesn't want to get in a jam because they keep turning this student in, or they, maybe go over the head because they're not getting any satisfaction from their, superiors at their school.
right, or they might feel like they're going to be called out as a racist, or they're picking on one segment of the classroom versus another segment of the classroom. And I can see a teacher, they just want to teach, they want to get through their curriculum, they want to get to the end of the day. And every now and then they get a warm fuzzy when they actually connect with a child. The child has this epiphany, and they feel a strong urge to love math, or to love history, or to love music or something. So I understand that the teachers aspect, because they didn't go to school to become referees in a UFC fight. they didn't try to get into a teaching position to be an authoritarian on a physical level, but that's where they're at. They're having to uh, what's the word I'm looking for? In the law, they have the duty of being in forma parentis, meaning normally parents are the ones who make decisions for their children. But when the school has your children in their power and control, they are sitting in a position similar to a parent. Well, any parent would defend their child. Any good parent would defend their child against an attacker. And any good parent would punish their child if they're the bad child. But the
Right.
teachers are not allowed to exercise their informa parentis rights. And they use it as a defense of their conduct when they really aren't allowed to do much at all.
Yeah. So
I go ahead.
so what I'm seeing too as well is this is a parenting problem, obviously, because the school is like the secondary. And yes, we have to make sure that there are rules in place and kids are processed according to what they're doing and they're punished accordingly. And we're not meeting some type of a equity standard. If a kid, they're out of line, they fight, they're using profanity in class, they should be punished. That's just the bottom line. The parents of these kids obviously are not doing what they should at home, which is a whole nother conversation. But
Right.
the children that are being assaulted, they're having to like sign contracts in some cases. I heard one lady reached out to us and said the schools wanted her kid to sign some contract to say that she tried to stay away from the kid that assaulted her. So that to me that kind of inadvertently punishes her, for action that she didn't commit, against her. The school system is just not in enforcing these things. And I'm not saying that this is their fault of how the children are acting. That's a parenting problem. But how they're responding to how the kids are acting is their fault. Because I say all the time, I got kids will do whatever you let them get away with. And they'll try to pit one parent against the other parent. It's just what kids do. You have to have rules, you have to enforce them, and kids understand authority. That's what they understand.
Right.
And it's cool. We get concerned about how everybody feels and all this other stuff. But hey, if you're the kid that's acting out, beating up other kids, cussing in the classroom, then your feelings just became secondary because we got to deal with you being a problem first.
Right.
Then, if the school feels like, hey, little Johnny or Susie may be having problems at home, well, after you quell their first problem and get them under control, then maybe you get the school counselor or something like that involved. Maybe you need to call the parents and have a meeting. But that shouldn't be the premise of you making a decision on whether you get this kid in trouble or not, because safety of the children comes first and the quality of education should, and the safety of teachers. So we gotta take care of that issue first.
I agree. I think it starts off with a breakdown of the family. And I think that when you have a breakdown of the family, you have the lack of generational wisdom. When I say generational wisdom, that comes, in my opinion, from a nuclear family who makes intentional decisions to benefit from the resources they have around them, not a snatch and grab, get what I can perspective. But the generational wisdom is lost also when you outsource the obligation to raise your children to strangers like the school teachers. And I say this a lot, that one school teacher can impact your child's life, even though they were only in their life for 1 year, by some confusing curriculum, some confusing enforcement method. And when parents outsource that obligation to teachers, they're losing that bonding with their own child. That bond is broken, the respect between parent and child is broken, and the children are left to their own devices because one, the parents outsource it to the school. The school is only in their life, 1 year segments, and the teachers may come and go, whatever else. And it's with this weird coping of violence, you don't have any deterrence. You don't have any actual solving the problem if everybody's just kicking it in a circle here.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
then the last part of this is that the children who want to be there aren't getting an education because they're learning all these social things about which teacher is going to allow them to do what.
Mm-hmm.
And you brought up the issue of all kids are going to find conflict, and that's natural. That's what should happen. Children learn the rules by learning what is not appropriate. And if you have an appropriate scope, sorry, my hands are real close, but if you have what's appropriate this big and you have a child that wants to get some attention, they want to lash out and get some attention to go this far before they're brought back into the fold. Okay, that child only varied from acceptable behavior this much. But if acceptable behavior is this much, how far does that child have to go to get that attention to be brought back into what is acceptable? And it might sound a little country, but I'm from a cattle farm, and the saying is even a blind cow will find the fence line. It'll just have a bloody nose. And it's the difficult way of learning how to be a responsible adult. That
Right.
if you don't fight, you don't, or sorry, rebellion is the first act of individual decision as a child goes through in puberty, adolescence, whatnot.
It's kind of like a declaration of their independence.
Yeah, and they learn how far they can go with that.
Yeah.
Teenage kids fight with their mothers because they know their mother's not going to kill them. It's a safe fight to be had.
Mm-hmm.
Siblings fight with each other to learn how to fight. I have two young daughters, and they can each have the same item. They're going to fight over which one had the other one first, just not over the substance of the fight, but learning how to fight. And it's safe within a home. Well, if you don't get that developmental mode and you just say, "Oh, that's how they are. They violate this rule, the code, whatever. They'll never get past that." You're making a social subsidy and you're allowing this scope of agreed upon behavior to include all behaviors when it should not all be acceptable behavior. So,
Yeah.
regardless of being a child, a young adult, an adult, or maybe even a 50-year-old man or woman, if you don't go through that developmental stage of learning from your errors, learning from your conflicts, you're still in that developmental mode. It just costs you more.
Right. And listening at what you're saying makes a whole lot of sense. If we can just keep you in a developmental stage, then we can just keep you crashing into a wall. You know what I mean? But
Mhm.
they're doing that, which is weird. It's like removing the consequence. Like you say, that's what shapes you. The cattle is gonna find that fence line. It's gonna remind him where it is. And like you say, that it's just expanding, like further and further out off of a cliff. And
Right.
these are the people that are gonna run society as we age. That's the scary part of this thing. And if we don't get a handle, and get this thing herded in the right way, we're gonna be in for a big, huge mess. You know, everywhere. So,
Right. And we're sidestepping the whole idea of peer pressure too,
yeah,
because this isn't one child to one teacher interaction. This is one teacher to many students, and those many students reinforce these norms this way. And now I'm out of screen. But the peer pressure to act wild, the peer pressure to fight, egging someone on to steal something, do something mischievous,
yeah,
that's an important factor of no enforcement too.
yeah. And the cell phones and all this stuff at the schools and everybody. We had a couple of fight videos we had to show on the war room just to let some of the people know that may not be in the county, how horrific this stuff is. But if you look at the culture of what's going on around the fight, that's even scarier to me because it's like everybody's just waiting on that moment to happen. It's like they're just juiced up. And when I was in school, if a fight broke out and it got bad enough, people went in the opposite direction. But it seemed like it's just
Or
this
break it up.
culture around social media and all this that you know people are more interested in watching the next big thing happen so they can get views on TikTok.
Right.
And that's just society that we living in right now, and it's crazy, you know.
Yeah, and normally if there was a fight at school, it was over something real too. And if there was a fight at school, we could go home and get away from it. And
Hmm.
you get off the school bus or you get home to your house, there was no continuation of the conflict.
Yeah.
And now with cell phones, computers, and I guess the modern generation, the harassment, or some people refer to the bullying, or it's 24/7. And I think that kids have enough to worry about. I don't want my kids to have cell phones until they have a job.
I'm with you. My wife said the same thing. We got an 11-year-old. She's like smart as a whip, and she's like, we got I got us new phones. I did a post on Facebook. Everybody was liking. I say, well, I finally bought a new phone. This one was slow, but anyway, I brought the old phones in the house, and the 11-year-old was like, what you gonna do with that phone? My wife was, it was like a knee jerk reaction. You ain't getting it. You're not getting the phone till you can, maybe you got a job or something, a little part time or something as you get older. But these things are toxic. And like you say, back in the day when we were going to school, if there was a conflict, it kind of died when the conflict is over. Now something happens, it's all over social media, and it's just repeating, it's just feeding into maybe a feeling that people after the fight they could have gotten over, but it's like everybody's talking about it, and it just
Right.
gasses everything up to go back into a loop. So you have probably a lot more potential for retaliation and fabricating things because of the attention that this fight got. Let's fabricate something to be able to film something to get views. It's a terrible thing. I know it's the world we live in, but it's pretty bad. There's a lot of peer pressure on the kids. And another thing that we've gone into in society is like this big group think, like everywhere. We was coming up, it was like, be yourself. Like you said, it talked about peer pressure a lot,
Right.
which is the same thing. But now it's like they encouraging to follow the crowd. That's like foreign language to me. I don't understand that language.
Yeah, and everybody has to have a label. Everybody has to have some sort of. It's not just Jared. It's not just Antonio. It's no. Jared is this, and that with this problem, that issue, and this. I don't know what emotional support puppy or something. Everybody has to have a diagnosis. Everybody's got to be a member of some group. And I hesitate. Well, no, I won't hesitate. But that's how you get people incrementally looking at socialism. If you're a member of a group first and not an individual, that's kind of contrary to a lot of our history as Americans,
Yes.
because our rights as Americans are individual rights. There are some rights to groups of freedom of assemble, but that's your right as an individual to assemble. And they're cloaking these groups, associations together out of a sense of empowerment. It's almost like they're unionizing our kids. And you're talking about going with the flow. Uh, we were talking about furries earlier today, and the issue of schools allowing children to dress up as animals and even putting litter boxes in the classrooms. How
That's,
absurd is that?
that's
And
insane.
uh, and people are not criticizing. So on one hand, you're
No,
allowing.
no, because you'll be you're anti. You're in. They've made all this big fuss about if you have a difference of opinion or if you want to live in reality, right?
Right.
Is
You fist fight in the
you're the
hallway.
bad guy. Like the word conspiracy theorist, or you're anti this, or you're not tolerant of something else, and now you on the list of bad guys. And now look what we got. We got the drags in the schools, like you saying. We got litter boxes. This is wild, and I know this going back and forth. But when you were saying that the teachers are basically kind of like a de facto parent because they're with the children for so many hours in a day,
Right.
and this is the main reason why I believe that the whole masking situation was so toxic, because it's like you had kids that were crying not to wear a mask that didn't work. The mask don't work. And it's like the school, my parent doesn't have more authority than my school does. Let that sink in for a minute. So it's like now I feel safer with what I'm being told at school, and it kind of like subverts the parent. And this is going to have serious problems associated with it.
Well, the cost of tolerance is the erosion of principles. And you talking about the drag queens at the story time. But there was recently a post about the gentleman who is a non-binary, transgendered, but the guy that was stealing luggage that was top secret clearance. And that type of person,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to name names, but the Department of Health and Human Services, that fella, those are the products of tolerance, the erosion of principles, and once again, this tolerance of this scope of agreed upon acceptable behavior. When it's this wide, those that are seeking the taboo have a further journey to go, and the further you go, the further it's going to be to bring you back.
Yeah.
And our children don't need to be exposed to that. I think adults have a little bit more leeway, but as when they're children, it's our duty to raise them to be responsible, productive adults. And that phrase alone is coming with some scrutiny.
Yeah. But we're committed to continuing to get the word out, having people on the show like yourself and all the efforts that you're doing, because we got to stay. We're standing up for our kids. We're not going to accept this anymore, and we're going to do everything that we can within a legal parameter to get these things remedied, because that's what we got to do. I hear people say, "Oh, I'm gonna leave this county. I'm gonna leave this place. I'm gonna jump out of here." This stuff is going to follow. Just look at the map of what's going on just here in Georgia. Somebody's got to stand up somewhere. We need people standing up everywhere. We can't keep running from these things. We got to stand up to it, and that's why the efforts, like the things that you're doing, you've represented plenty parents on different cases and things, trying to get to the bottom of things. And my hat's off to you. We got to stay in the fight. That's why we got the war room. We need solutions, and we're going to stay focused on this stuff until we get it remedied. The Bible tells us, in Luke, for with God, nothing shall be impossible. My pastor says this all the time, and I truly believe it, because persecution has already started. Look at what's going on. Look at what's happening to our kids and stuff. Look at the rights that's being eroded. So we're either going to stand up now, because nobody's coming to save us. We're going to stand up now with some people that got the same ambitions that we do to protect our families, communities, and children, or we're going to wait till we get in the knock on the door, or we 2 inches from the gulag. So I appreciate what you're doing, brother. Let the people know how to follow you, and if you have anything that's coming up, now's the time to do that.
Well, you can follow me on Facebook. It's under my name, Jared Craig, JARED CRAIG. You can also follow my Vet Voice podcast, which is on Rumble, Facebook channel. It's also on Getter Social, Truth Social, and it's under Veterans for America First, Veterans for Trump. And you can follow me. I don't hide very easily, and I'm out pretty vocal every which way. One solution that we didn't talk about that we're going to try to promote at the state level is to add to the curriculum a constitutional class starting in 8th grade. That's not just a one semester class, but it's a
Amen,
core
brother.
class from 8th grade through 12th grade. And that would inform the students that we're a constitutional republic first. And I think getting the education of how things are supposed to work, we got to get a core curriculum factor of Constitution in there. But back to my social media, we are all over the place. Feel free to reach out to me, contact me. If you have anything to share, feel free to do so, and I'll definitely be in touch with you, Mr. Jones. And
All
we're not
right.
strangers, so I look forward to future shows.
I appreciate it. Oh, and before I forget, this segment, Cross County Lines, brought to you by Gold Standard Consumer Consultants, LLC. If you're seeking professional assistance in navigating the business and consumer realm, look no further. a highly experienced consumer consultant. Gold Standards is dedicated to helping you achieve your desired outcomes. Whether you're a consumer or business owner, they have the resources and expertise to provide you with the best possible guidance and support. If they don't have the answer to your problem, they work tirelessly to find the solution. Don't hesitate to contact them now. Gold Standard Consumer Consultants. That's 904-580-4034. That's 904-580-4034. That's 904-580-4034. We'll see you back. Appreciate it you coming in, Mr. Craig. Looking forward to having you in this fight with us.
God bless.
All right.
Courtroom, Gwinnett County, the people's voice, keeping you informed. Courtroom, Gwinnett County, the people's voice.